It is a football fairy tale that is already folklore.
His voice is unmissable, selling sports to millions of viewers around the world. Interviewing some of international sports' biggest celebrities, from Rafa Nadal to Manny Pacquiao.
What does it mean to you to be representing your country?
It's a journey from Edinburgh to Atlanta and the adventure in between.
Come on inside and I'll show you around.
Don Riddell, CNN's world sport anchor and international correspondent, talks over 2 decades in the industry, from hard news to witnessing firsthand some of sport's finest moments. A Morning Shot special report, now on CNC3. Let's welcome to the show CNN World Sport anchor and correspondent Don Riddell. Don, thank you very much for joining us from Atlanta this morning. How does it feel to be on the other side of the camera?
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to being on the other side of the camera, hearing what you have to ask me. But I also want to thank you for just giving me the opportunity to be in front of a camera. It's been a while, thanks to the coronavirus, since I've actually been able to do any kind of broadcasting. So appreciate the opportunity.
How has the pandemic been treating you? Us sports guys have been suffering, really.
Yeah, I mean, God, is it 2-3 weeks now since the NBA shut down? And that was the day everything changed for me and my department at CNN. Most of our company has been working from home for the last couple of weeks. And for sports anchors and correspondents, it's very tough. There really isn't any sport to talk about anymore. But we do appreciate the bigger picture here. And at times like this, sport really doesn't matter anyway.
So how does CNN deal with something like this, and what's been the plan of action to cover sport on an international network like yours?
Well, I think we quickly found, as the sports games dried up and as the storylines dried up, I would say the Olympics being cancelled was the last big storyline that we actually had to cover. Our network, our global network, has realized that sport really just doesn't matter. It's something that we all find very entertaining, and of course sport is a massive business at the best of times, but right now it is completely irrelevant and there is no sport happening anyway. So the CNN network has done a very good job, I think, of covering this global pandemic. The network has had a lot of things to figure out. Firstly, how to keep its employees safe. As I mentioned, most of us are now working from home. Very, very few people are actually working in the studio. The next big problem is how to keep some kind of programming on air, and I think they've done an incredible job, and I think we've all found new ways of workflows and workarounds and utilizing the technology that's available to us now. And of course, the network has also got to make sure that whatever's being broadcast right now is factually accurate, and that can be difficult in these times, especially when covering government meetings and authority press conferences, making sure that that the people watching are actually getting the best factual information.
You know, Don, this is an opportunity for yourself as well. Many people know you as a CNN World Sport anchor and sport correspondent, traveling the world to different sporting events. But you've actually been a hard news reporter for many years. You've covered some of the biggest events, the royal wedding, the Iranian elections that was ever so controversial. Yeah. You've covered the Mumbai terror attacks. You are a hard news reporter as well. You could be the man for this moment as well.
You know, it's very kind of you to say. I certainly enjoyed that part of my career as well. It was very rewarding, and I actually learned a lot during that time, which hopefully has made me a better sports broadcaster or just broadcaster in general. Yeah, I suppose I could be utilized during this time, and I've offered my services, but I'm not the only frustrated reporter at CNN. A lot of news reporters at CNN are also struggling to get on air, as I say, because of the directive to try and keep everybody safe, try and keep people out of studios and buildings, means that we've drastically reduced our programming for the right reasons, I believe. But it's not just me that's trying to keep myself busy at the moment. There's a lot of reporters at CNN and anchors at CNN right now who would dearly love to be on air, but unfortunately can't be.
You know, Don, your career has been quite a remarkable one, and I mean, you're nowhere close to the end of it, but in many regards, that versatility that you have, that so few journalists have, and a lot of journalists admire, where did that versatility come from?
Oh, I don't know. You know, I always wanted to work in this business. You know, when I was at university and when I was kind of in the latter stages of high school, I really aspired to be in the television news business. I hadn't really figured out what it was that I was going to be. And so actually I started behind the scenes. I started in a technical capacity. I was rewinding tapes and sticking barcodes on tapes, floor managing, learning how to operate the cameras, teaching myself how to edit in the evenings. And I kind of quite organically got involved with the sports department. And there were some guys in that department who took a shine to me and took me under their wings and showed me the ropes. And they allowed me to do some research and write a script. And well, you've written a script, so you might as well do a voiceover. And well, now you've done a voiceover, you might as well go out and do some interviews. And it happened very, very organically. And then it got to a point where I was producing a show for an anchor that never came to work. There'd been a mix up with the schedule. And the only way for it was for me to anchor the show. That then led to, you know, several years of doing that at a regional station, and I really enjoyed that. Then I moved to London, where the sports news was a bit harder, so I was exposed to bigger stories. Then, of course, I came to CNN, and then I became a news anchor and now a sports anchor again. So I think the versatility is really just as a result of this journey that I've been on. I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to experience so many different aspects of this business. There was never really my plan, but to be honest, I never really had a plan. But if I could do it all over again, I would probably do it exactly the same way.
But which one would you prefer, if you had to choose?
Choose between what?
News and sport.
You know, I've thought about that a lot. The news experience was a lot of fun, but it's very serious. It's very sobering. It's hard to be yourself. I think the thing that I've come to realize by doing both is that as a sports broadcaster, you really can be yourself. You can bring your personality into it. You can also write your own material. When I was in news, and I believe most news anchors, they have their material written for them, unless you're in a breaking news format where it's ad-libbing and you're making it up as you go along. So I think I enjoy being a sports guy. I do. For a long time when I was in sport, I wanted to be in news. What's the phrase about the grass always being greener? Now that I'm back in sport, I think I really do enjoy it. But I'm glad that I have the versatility, because you never know in this business what's going to happen next. So it is important to me, I suppose, that I know I can do it, and that could be an option going forward.
Did you always want to be a sports journalist? Did you always want to be a journalist?
Do you know, I spend a lot of time with our interns at CNN, and I'm always amazed when they come in and they know exactly what they want to do. And apparently they've known since they were 13, because I was not that guy. I think I always just assumed I'd go into finance because my father worked in finance. And that was a great plan until I was about 16 and I took an economics class and absolutely hated it. And then I really panicked because I really didn't have a plan. I think when I was at school, the lessons we were taught were very, very traditional. It was the three sciences. It was math, English, history, geography, French. Like, that was it. Like, you know, now people do journalism or media at high school, or criminology, or all these really fun topics that we never did when I was at school. So I felt like I was never really exposed to it. I didn't know anybody that worked in the business. It never really occurred to me that that was actually a job. But of course, when I figured it out, then I realized that I loved it, and I fell in love with it very, very quickly, and it was very rewarding. But it was never my plan. It was never my plan. That's quite possibly not the answer you were expecting, but that's my story.
You know, 7 years ago, you fronted an award-winning documentary, Branded a Rebel. Of course, you're British, living in America now, so you obviously have a great interest in cricket, but that particular documentary meant a lot to West Indian people, because it showed us what life was like back in that apartheid era. What was it like working on Branded a Rebel?
Well, it's one of the best things I think I've ever worked on. And I don't say that because of the job myself or the team did. It was just such a fascinating subject. I remember the Rebel tours. Of course, it wasn't just the West Indies team that went to South Africa. It was England, it was Australia, and they all suffered kind of minor consequences for breaking the apartheid ban. But the West Indies team, as you know, paid a very heavy price for going on those tours. And it occurred to me when I started looking into it that nobody had ever really done the story, or when the story had been told, it really hadn't been told from the perspective of the players who actually went. They were very harshly judged. As you know, many of them were ostracized from their communities. They were banned from playing for the West Indies team for the rest of their lives. It was quite challenging getting some of them to talk. A lot of them didn't want to talk. I think a lot of them just assumed that we were going to tell the same story that had always been told. But to get the opportunity to gain their trust, to sit down with them and give them an opportunity to present their point of view was incredibly rewarding. And I hope it was helpful and useful to them too, because I really felt as though after 30 years, there had only been one narrative, there had only been one side of the story. And so I hope we were able to change the narrative slightly and put a slightly more positive spin on their experience.
Cricket, you live in America now, you're British. Do you miss cricket, and how often what are your feelings towards cricket really, because it's not that popular in the United States?
No, it's not. Although we are seeing sports that I never thought would make it here gaining a following. So rugby seems to be the latest sport that I grew up with that actually is starting to happen in the United States. You know, this is a massive country. There are so many potential fans here for new sports. Rugby now has a new league which is kicking off soon. There seems to be a lot of excitement in it, so that's really wonderful. Cricket, I think, has been very, very difficult. I find it very hard even to watch cricket here. You know, I find it very hard to get it on any kind of cable channel or platform. But I do still follow it. I was in England last year when England won the World Cup, which was just absolutely extraordinary. I mean, that final was quite incredible, as you remember.
It was incredible.
So when I get to watch it, I still really enjoy it. But unfortunately, I don't get the chance to see it so much anymore.
So besides the England World Cup victory, which was absolutely enthralling, you know, Don, your CV is incredible. You were at Spain's 2010 World Cup victory. You've been to Wimbledon, you've been to the Ryder Cup, the Tour de France, the Rugby World Cup, 5 Champions League finals consecutively, by the way, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. You know, when you reflect on all these places and tournaments that you've been to, what memories stand out to you?
I mean, just hearing that list read back to me, I mean, the first thing I think is just how incredibly lucky I have been. And I mean that quite sincerely. I have been incredibly fortunate to have all of these opportunities and to have been employed by CNN for so long, since 2002 now. This will be 18 years this year. I mean, these are just wonderful memories, incredible opportunities. And it's not just covering these events and going to events that so many sports fans would kill to be able to attend themselves. It's meeting the athletes and hearing their stories, being inspired by them. I think that's one of the things I've come to really appreciate the longer I've done this job, is the ability to be able to tell people's stories, to kind of figure out what makes them tick. What motivates them, and then being able to tell those stories to our audience in a way that hopefully will inspire and motivate them too.
I'm glad that you say that, because the times that we live in, you know, Don, from your experience over the last 2 decades, what does sport do? You've traveled to every corner of this world on almost every continent. What can something like sport do for human beings that is often undervalued?
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of people who don't get sport. They don't understand. I think mainly they don't understand it, and they find sport impenetrable. So they find it easier to just say, I don't like sport. My view always has been, as a sports anchor and reporter on a news network, is that you have to find ways that sport actually can be relevant and meaningful for people who perhaps have an itchy trigger finger on the remote control and who might be tempted to turn off when the sports news comes on. We use a phrase on our show a lot, the power of sport to unite us, to bring people together. It is a community experience. the power of sport to inspire and motivate. I think sport has an incredibly valuable role in our world and in our society. It's not just entertainment. It's not just a business. I think we can all learn so much from sport. And those who have played it and those who are fans of any sport will be able to tell you what a communal experience it is. And it is a thing where once you cross the touchline and you take the field or the court, we're all equal. I mean, obviously, some people are better than others, but it doesn't matter what you do outside of the field. Once you get onto that field, and once it's 22 guys playing soccer or 30 guys playing rugby, it doesn't matter whether, you're a school teacher or a janitor or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what your quality of life is like. Once you get onto that field, you all have one thing in common. And you're equals. And I think a lot of us could learn a lot of things from sport.
You said something very key at the top of that statement, delivering sport for a predominantly news network at CNN. How seriously is something like sport taken at CNN, which really deals day in, day out, hour in, hour out on hard news?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate. As I say, I've been at CNN since 2002, and they take sport very seriously. I host a half-hour show every day. We have numerous live shows throughout the 24-hour period, and then more again on the weekends. So CNN values sport immensely. As we've discussed, not right now. There is no sport, and there are frankly bigger things to worry about. We're living through unprecedented times, but normally CNN really values sport. I think they get it. They understand the value of it, and I'm very fortunate for that.
I want to talk about your news life a little bit because it's actually really, really interesting. You covered the royal wedding. You covered the G20 summit that happened in London as well.
Yeah.
From the studios, you covered the Haiti earthquake. You also covered the death of Michael Jackson. So these were extremely, extremely crucial moments in the world's history. What was it to be part of those things?
Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of us feel about this business is that you have a front row seat to history. You literally can see history unfolding before your eyes, and you have the opportunity to tell those stories, which is very rewarding. Some of those events really were quite extraordinary, and you really do wake up not knowing what the day is going to bring, and then by the end of it, it's something that you perhaps couldn't have even imagined. The death of Michael Jackson was something that was truly, truly shocking, and of course, his story has changed a lot since he died. But at the time, the world really was in mourning. That was quite incredible. The royal wedding was something that I think it was a story I'm very fond of. There's not many news stories where everybody is smiling and everybody is happy. And that was the story of the royal wedding. I was in front of Buckingham Palace for a week. I was there on Monday morning, and I was doing, 12, 13-hour days all the way through till Friday evening after the wedding. And just to be around so many happy, smiling, positive people covering such a major story that the whole world was interested in was really cool. It was really cool. And honestly, it changed my own perception of the royal family. A lot of people in the UK kind of dismiss them, think they're not really worth having. And I know that conversation continues to this day. But in that moment, when you saw all of London come together and you saw so many tourists in London at that moment and everybody united behind this one magnificent, joyous occasion, it was really cool. And to be able to be literally with a front row seat right in front of Buckingham Palace, I was very lucky.
I want to flip back to sport because you don't only talk the talk, Don, you also walk the walk, or in this case, run the walk, because you've run both the London and New York marathons. So you're very much an athlete yourself.
Well, I used to be. That was a while ago. If you haven't run a marathon and if you think you're capable of running one, I would urge you to try. I sometimes talk about the top 5 things I've done or achieved in my life, and the marathon is definitely one of them. I'm so pleased that I had an opportunity to do it, and I had the time to train for them. I wouldn't perhaps recommend doing 2 in 1 year, which is what I did. 2002, I did London and New York. So London is April, and I think New York is November. And I was just exhausted for the second one, and didn't enjoy it as much as London. But it was incredible. It really was incredible. And to be, again, we talk about sport uniting people and bringing people together, but to be on the streets of London with tens of thousands of other runners, a lot of whom were just completely ordinary, non-professional athletes like myself, to have so many people on the streets cheering you on, inspiring you, it was incredible. I'm so pleased I did it. I know I couldn't do one now for numerous reasons, but one just being the time it takes to prepare and train for these things. So I'm glad I was able to do it when I was younger. And I think it also gave me a very slight window into what professional athletes actually have to go through. I think a lot of us forget or just don't see the sacrifice they have to make, the years and years when they're younger, and then the hours and hours they put into training and staying at that top level. I think most of us just don't really appreciate it. We don't see it, so why would we? They just roll up onto a soccer field on a Saturday and kick a ball around, and we all cheer and enjoy it. But I think we really fully understand what it is that it takes for them to be at that level. So I sort of understand it a little bit, having now done the marathon myself.
Yeah, it's a real journey running a marathon. As we speak, Don, there are hundreds and hundreds of children out there who aspire to be athletes, and if they don't want to be athletes, they want to be involved in sport in some way or the other, and one of those avenues is broadcasting. They would love to talk about sports, they'd love to report on sports. What would you say to them?
Well, it's a wonderful profession. There are so many different opportunities, and a lot more now than there were when I began in the mid-90s. We did have the internet and email when I began my career in 1994, but not like we do now. We didn't have phones with cameras on. We didn't have editing equipment on computers. We didn't have social media and access to blogging. All of those things now anybody can do. And so I would say, if anybody is really serious about getting into this business, or even if you just want to have a play with it and see if you like it, there aren't really the barriers to entry that there used to be. So it's something that everybody can do. And I would suggest that if you are really serious about doing this as a profession, you need to be doing those things, because all of your future rivals and competitors are already doing it. They all do have Twitter feeds, they do write blogs, they do go out and shoot and edit their own videos and put them on YouTube. And so what if only 50 people watch them? The point is you're doing it and you're gaining experience and practice. And when you come to the big interview with a potential employer, you can say, well, this is what I do. Those opportunities didn't exist when I started out. I was very fortunate that I was able to get a job and then kind of climb the ladder once I was in my first broadcasting company. But I would say to anybody that wants to start, there really is nothing stopping you at the moment. So just get out there and get on with it and enjoy it. And I think wherever that journey leads, you'll find it very enjoyable anyway.
In a market so saturated, that is journalism, the market that we're in, how do people, you really have to have a passion, I guess you're saying, for it, and not really be bothered too much about who else is out there and how many the numbers that are out there competing against you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware that it's very competitive, again, in a way that it wasn't when I started in the 90s. I think you have to have a thick skin. I think you have to, and that applies to so many different scenarios in this business. You really can't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just worry about your own journey and be the best that you can. But accept that the odds are not necessarily going to be in your favor because of the sheer volume of people. And this is the same for athletes, by the way. You can be an amazing high school athlete, and then you can go to university and be an amazing university athlete. But so few of them actually make it all the way into broadcasting. Into a professional sports career. So, I guess it's the same in broadcasting, but that doesn't mean that you can't still work in the industry. Not everybody is going to be a reporter. Not everybody is going to be an anchor. I speak to a lot of interns who come through, and they have this as their goal, and they say, "Hey, look, this is great, and you should aspire to this, and this should be your dream, but you need to have other interests within the industry. You need to accept that it's not necessarily going to happen for you, or it's not going to happen when you want it to happen for you, or it's not going to happen for you at this company. Maybe you need to leave to go somewhere else to be taken more seriously, to get up the next rung on the ladder." So, yeah, can't quite remember how we started this question, but it is competitive.
But you answered
but
it.
It's all good. Yeah.
You've interacted with hundreds of athletes throughout your 18-year career at CNN. Which one is your favorite athlete, or at least which one do you look up to, and why is that person so important to you, or has been so important to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I've been very fortunate to cover some of the all-time greats who've performed in this era, so that would include Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and they're all good guys. I know Tiger's had his ups and downs. Incredibly, he's rediscovered his form and seems to have rehabilitated himself socially and professionally. So I think those are the athletes that I would point to when I'm kind of looking at my own resume of big interviews. But I think honestly, I find interviews with athletes that people have never heard of to be just as rewarding, because everybody has a story, and the magic of this business is being able to access that story, and to be able to tell it and learn what makes these people tick. And I would also say that the athletes most people haven't heard of are also a little more forthcoming. They're a little more honest. They've got more to say, and so those interviews and those opportunities are just as rewarding for me.
You've covered so many sports: tennis, Formula One. You've done this documentary on cricket. You've done soccer, football, rugby. Which sport is your favorite?
I'm laughing because I get that question quite a lot, and I don't think I have an answer that really satisfies people. So I love all sports, right? I've come to realize that it's not necessarily about the sport, it's about the story. And every sport has an opportunity to produce an incredible story. So I've really, I think, become, if I can say this, less of a sports fan and more of a story fan. Of course, I still love all sports. I still enjoy watching them, and I'm still moved by them. But they're all good. And I would also say that different sports work for me in different environments or different times. So, I would probably default to soccer being my favorite sport. I probably would if you really put me on the spot, and I can point to a couple of games last year, like the Champions League semi-finals, which were just absolutely incredible. I've never seen my office at work before going on air with a show so enthralled and so gripped by the drama that was unfolding on the screen in front of us. But I look at a sport like cycling, which I used to think was frankly quite boring, but books on cycling are some of the best sports books I've ever read. Cricket is a great sport, but I think it's really great on radio. You can't say that about every sport.
No.
So it kind of depends on the sport, kind of how much I like it that day or how I'm experiencing it. But sport, it's all good.
Cycling boring, from the guy who covers living golf, has been covering living golf for quite a long time. Do you think this pandemic that we're going through right now, the world, will it have an impact, an everlasting impact? Will it change the face and world of sport even after?
Quite possibly. I mean, the truth, Ryan, is nobody has any idea how long this is going to last, whether it's going to happen again later this year or again next year. Nobody has any idea what's going to be left of the economy and how quickly that's going to recover or not. And so that will impact everything. I already know that my life is probably not going to be the same again, just because of things I've experienced or learned, or my profession is probably not going to be the same again. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. It's just going to be that we've all learned new things. When it comes to sport, remember, sport is a business. So what is the economy going to be like? Are we going to have as many games? Maybe we're going to have more games. I think one thing that I've heard people say, certainly within the soccer profession, and I think even the head of FIFA has said this recently, maybe we just play too many games. Maybe the calendar is just too packed, because when something like this happens, we all realize that there's nowhere to go. There's no extra weekend to make up these games. So I think a lot of things could change. But at the moment, trying to figure out what that's going to be is pure speculation, because I think we're still in the early stages of this. And who knows what the world is going to be like when we come out the other side. I think one thing that's going to take a while to recover is, I mean, after 9/11, how long did it take people to feel comfortable flying on airplanes again? It was a long time. It was a long time. How quickly are people going to feel comfortable getting on planes now? How quickly are people going to feel comfortable going into packed stadiums to watch sports events or music concerts? I think that's going to be a while. What about athletes? Are they now going to be tested on a regular basis? Is that something that we're going to see as a matter of course, that athletes have to be routinely tested every 2 weeks to make sure they don't have this or any other infectious disease that they could spread around? I think it's impossible to know what the world is going to look like after this, but like everything else, I'm sure sport will, in some ways, look different.
Don Riddell, thank you so much for this interview, and thank you very much for being on the show.
It's been great to be here, Ryan. I appreciate the opportunity, and it was wonderful chatting with you too, mate.
Please stay safe, Don.
You too.
Thank you.